Hey everyone, this is Mike Wolf, and welcome to the Spoon Podcast. Today's guest is Stephanie Michelsen, who is the CEO and founder of a company called Gelotech. And what Gelotech does is make collagen without the animal. And they're doing it in a way that is a little bit different from what you may have heard from some of the other startups in the space. If you're familiar with companies like Gelator, for example, which are using precision fermentation, well, Gelotech does it a little bit different. They're using cell-cultured, cell-based technology to produce the cells. And those cells actually aren't the product that they sell to consumers, which are customers or B2B customers, other businesses like food companies or makeup or cosmetic companies. No, what the product is actually the collagen that the cells produce. So collagen essentially is something that's a byproduct of these cells, and that's harvested, and then that's sold to the customer. And that's really what they're doing. And in this sense, they're similar to companies like BioMilk and some of these cell-cultured breast milk companies that are using cells to produce breast milk. So it's an interesting approach. I think it's fairly novel in the space. And so obviously in a market like collagen, a billions and billions of dollar market where it isn't very sustainable, it isn't super animal friendly, I do think new approaches like this are definitely interesting. And so I was excited to talk with Stephanie about what she's building. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. But before we get to that, I will encourage you to go to The Spoon and check out our podcasts. If you want to also listen to podcasts, you can do it in your normal podcast app, whether that's Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Check us out there. And also check out the Smart Kitchen Summit. The Smart Kitchen Summit is coming back November 9th to 10th. Just go to smartkitchensummit.com. You'll see a button there to click on tickets if you're interested. But we would love to have you there. So that's it for now. Let's get to my conversation with Stephanie Michelsen. Hey, well, all right. I'm really excited to be here with Stephanie Michelsen, the co-founder, and CEO of Gelotech.
Yes.
How you doing, Stephanie?
Me. I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. You are in Raleigh, North Carolina, but I don't think you were born there. I think you were born in Europe, right?
Exactly. I'm originally from Denmark, and then I grew up in Sweden, and I spent a few years in the California Bay Area, and then moved back to Denmark to pursue my studies in biotech, and then back to the U.S.
Okay, so the second trip was to North Carolina, it sounds like.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
All right, well, we're going to talk about Gelotech and your cell-based collagen, the product you are making, and we'll get into that. But before we do, it'd be best if you can maybe tell the audience what exactly Gelotech does. What are you making?
Yeah, so we are making sustainable, ethical, and animal-free collagen. I'm sure that a lot of people are familiar with collagen and its derivative gelatin, but if you're not, it's actually the most abundant protein in most animals. And us humans, it's about 35% of all protein. It's a structural protein. So it's basically what kind of helps connect our cells and build tissue and give it that structural integrity. So it's a very important protein, and we also use it a lot for like food and bev, cosmetics and skincare, also biomedical and pharmaceutical applications. You probably don't realize how much is around you until you actually start looking into it, whether, you're taking vitamins or as a vaccine stabilizer. It's in so many products around us. And so, what we're doing is we're basically making it in a much more efficient way that doesn't require animals.
There's a couple startups out there that are looking at next generation collagen. Yeah. You are a little bit differentiated, and we'll get into why. But clearly, traditional factory farmed collagen is problematic. It's cruel, and you're looking to basically solve that problem. Talk about the original concept. Was this something you've been thinking of for a while? Did you wake up one night and say, I need to do this? Or how did you get to this path?
So, like I said, my background is in biotechnology. So I am a scientist. I love science. Right now, I don't do too much science myself. I'm, the CEO, but really, I actually, during my final year of my master's, I got to do this fellowship program. So basically 5 Danish students got to go to the Bay Area and enter different biotech startups. And it was during that time that I was first introduced to alternative protein. And I was like, wow, this is super cool. For me, it was the first time that I saw this very kind of scientific kind of approach to food and ingredients and materials. And I was like, wow, this is super cool because it's combining, what I love, which is science, and also, I guess, a cheesy idea of like somehow doing your part to make the world a better place. And so I was super inspired. I was like, wow, I want to move into this field. And obviously there's a lot of kind of new startups popping up, a lot of funding being invested into the area. And then I kind of started thinking a lot about, what that future will look like. Like if we actually were to completely say no more, animal farming, no more animal agriculture. Like if we took away cows and pigs, what are some of the challenges going to be? And I think, we have great alternatives to milk and meat, right? Like there's a lot of great companies out there doing really, really kind of realistic substitutes and really delicious things. But we also have to think about all the kind of byproducts that we're getting from animal agriculture. And that's why I quickly realized that collagen and gelatin is something that is still 100% reliable on, reliant on animal agriculture. And it's also a huge market. It's growing even, and people maybe don't realize exactly where it comes from, but it comes from animal agriculture. And so that was something I saw was going to be a problem because, take away the animals and no longer there's not going to be any more functional collagen. And so that's kind of what inspired me to, build this company and try to focus on this super exciting, also from like a science perspective, it's a really cool protein. It's large, it's complex. So yeah, that was kind of inspiration to really help kind of facilitate that green transition and support, everyone that wants to not rely on animals in the future for ingredients, materials, and things like that.
Okay, so you're in the Bay Area. You start thinking about what you can do to make a difference in the world. I think it's smart that you go into a space that's a little less crowded. There's lots of cell-based meat companies at this point. What time frame are we talking about? What year is this?
So this was just over a year ago, actually.
Okay, just a year ago. And you guys founded, I think, in 2020.
Exactly, mid-COVID.
So you had this idea, and it sounds like you moved quickly, right? You had this idea and you wanted to make a difference.
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty short path from the conception of the idea to starting it. Mm-hmm. Talk about that process. Did you look around for a co-founder? How did you get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so I was lucky that during my fellowship program, so the internship that I did have in the Bay Area, I was lucky enough to make a lot of really, really great connections. And so one of them was Ryan Bethencourt, who's the CEO of Wild Earth. And so
also loves North Carolina.
Who also moved. Yeah, he's about half an hour away from me. I'm actually meeting him later. But yeah, so he really helped me. He's helped a lot of founders take things, give them kind of, I guess like their feet or so to say to get them off the ground. And so he helped me with that as well and helped me kind of raise that initial fundraise. And then from that point on, it was really just, me, and I was in search of a scientific co-founder. I knew that even though I love science, I was not the one to kind of take the science to the next level. I like kind of being at the interaction of science and business and working with people and really communicating that out. So I went into literature and journals and searched to find, scientific, people that were really excellent at cellular agriculture. And that's pretty much how I did it. And I found Kylie, who was eager enough to get on board and help me get it even further off the ground.
All right. So Ryan, I think was the initial investor.
Yes. Yeah. So I have Big Idea Ventures, and then Ryan and Marilla's fund, Sustainable Food Ventures, were kind of the two first that really helped us get started and make it kind of official.
Great. And so you found a co-founder, and was the co-founder based in Europe?
Yes. Yeah, she was.
It was kind of tough balancing. You guys started during a pandemic. Yeah. One of you was here, one of you was there. What happened?
Yeah, so I think initially, it worked really great because we're at such an early stage, and it was a lot around kind of fundraising and kind of like the more initial, I guess, proof of concept development. And we were just two people, so it worked fine, being across two different time zones. And then as we were looking to scale, once we had raised our pre-seed, it became really challenging for me to kind of manage, different, like two teams in different places and different time zones. And also it's just really important, when you're such early stage, you need to make sure that everyone is, in the same place, working together, that we can, I can go into someone's office or I can go into the lab and help out and see exactly what's going on. So, basically, we decided to move everything under one roof here in the RTP area here in North Carolina to kind of really boost the progress of the company.
All right. So do you have another co-founder now besides you?
No, now it's just me and then my wonderful team that are working
and you're building
very
a team,
hard. Yes.
Which is great. And so let's talk about the product, right? So you are building a cell-based collagen. And from what I understand, it's a little bit different from cell-based meat in that it's not the product. The cells aren't the meat, right? The collagen is the byproduct or the product of the cells. Yeah. Which is interesting. Talk about that.
Yeah, so, if you think about it, really, we consider ourselves in a way a hybrid between fermentation and cell-based, because it's similar to fermentation in the sense that, the product is something that's secreted outside the cell. So it's something you can basically milk from the cells. And then it's similar to cell-based because we're using animal cells. So really what we're doing is taking, these very specialized cells that are extremely good at making collagen and also making functional collagen, which is what's very important. It's a full protein. And when we talk about protein, structure is everything. Structure is function. And so that's why we basically utilized cellular agriculture, because we know that that's going to yield a functional collagen. But again, like you said, the cells aren't the product. So we're not going to be eating the cells. The cells actually is something we can separate from the end product, which also helps us in terms of regulatory. So that's really nice.
So you nurture, you keep the cells happy. They're producing collagen for you, which is different than consuming the cells. You have some cohorts in the space that are doing similar approach, but for example, cell-based breast milk, like biomilk and Turtle Tree. But why did you decide to go down the cell-based collagen route and not use fermentation? What was that decision like?
So being a biotechnologist, I think anyone that studies biotechnology probably has done a lot of heterologous expression in like yeast or bacteria, things like that, fermentation, right? So it's very common, and it works really, really great if you're talking about small proteins. So enzymes or small peptides, things like that. But when you're talking about a protein like collagen, which is a very large and also very complex protein, it's actually, it's made out of 3 different peptides. And then they come together, and then they are post-translationally modified, which is something that more kind of advanced cells can do. So that's really why, in my view, I think you won't be able to get that same functionality and that same full structure taking a fermentation-based approach. Whereas like when you have a cell-based approach, that's what they do in the animals. That's what our cells do in our body. We know that they make it functional. So we're like, okay, why don't we, I guess like an analogy would be, let's take a plane and make it fly better and faster and higher rather than kind of taking a car and then reinventing it and turning it into a plane, right? So we're taking what nature and evolution has already done, beautifully optimized, and then we're optimizing it even further.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is you're getting more functionality using the cell-based approach versus precision fermentation. Are there any disadvantages? Like, is precision fermentation potentially faster to produce collagen?
Yeah. I mean, even just from, the cells that you use, I think the doubling time it's a lot quicker. And also cost-wise, cell-based is still, more expensive. Luckily, with so many companies moving into the space, and now, there's startups even focusing on only media or only bioreactors. I think that we're going to see a huge kind of, much more faster pace and a big change in that. But yeah, the drawbacks of using cell-based is cost and the fact that it's just newer, like anything. We still have to figure out exactly, all the bits and pieces, I guess. And it is a little bit slower, but if you think about it, right, like fermentation, maybe if you're using like you want to produce a protein of interest, maybe you have like 10 to 20% yield. And, in our bodies, like I said, collagen is about 35%. So that's also a really great starting point that we can kind of optimize, right, in terms of yield, because it is the most abundant protein in most animals.
Because you're doing a byproduct, or you're producing something through the cells, and and humans are not consuming that, what does that mean from a regulatory standpoint? Does this mean for an easier regulatory glide path, you think, versus if it was like you're consuming the cells?
Absolutely. So luckily for us, collagen and gelatin are not novel foods. It's something we've actually been consuming for many, many, many years. If anyone has ever had kind of like a bone broth or something like that, that thickness is thanks to collagen, really. So that's really nice. And the fact that we can separate, media from cells and then, have the protein by itself, that will allow us to hopefully, get it through a GRAS certification, or generally regarded as safe, which is a lot quicker than having to go through kind of like a novel food. But I guess, in the US, we're still kind of waiting, or all the cell-based, companies are still kind of waiting, like what's going to happen? What is that going to look like? But certainly the fact that we can separate in the protein, from the rest of, the cells and the media is something that can really help us fast track that, a lot.
So maybe you can, because you're following this, you're looking at what the U.S. is doing. Can you give us your opinion on how long are we going to be waiting? Are we expecting the Biden administration or the FDA or someone to come out with some ruling soon? What is kind of the expectation around milestones of that?
I believe they were meant to come up with something this fall. Something. So I don't really know, but I think certainly like the push, I mean, in other countries it's happening, right? Like I think with Just Food, like it's literally happening. And I think Asia is so, progressive, which is awesome. So hopefully now the US will kind of wake up and be like, all right, this is real. This is happening. And, the companies, we need some guidelines to know exactly how to tackle that, because no matter how fast, product development goes and what scale we get to, if we can't get it through the regulatory, then it's not going to matter, right? So, I'm hoping soon, I would hope there's going to be something before the end of the year that will kind of at least let us know what that is going to look like. And then whenever, the first approval, I'm not sure, hopefully soon after that.
Okay. And so your product is not going directly to consumers. My understanding is you're a B2B company.
Yeah.
And so what type of companies are you targeting, and also what regions? Are you mainly focused on the US, or are you looking all over the world?
We're kind of agnostic when it comes to, area and geography, but right now, because basically I guess another limitation or a challenge I would say with cell-based is scale, right? Because it's not as kind of established technology as fermentation. So we're still working out exactly how to scale animal or cell agriculture. It's a bit different compared to if you have like suspension culture or adherent cell cultures. There's some differences. That's the main limitation. So that's why we're kind of sticking to higher end collagen, applications where you need less quantity. So that would be places like, healthcare, pharmaceutical applications, biomaterials, and then probably going to skincare and cosmetics, which is also kind of higher end collagens, and you need a little bit less. And then finally, when we really get to the bigger scale, that's when we can start kind of digging even more into kind of food and beverage applications. And hopefully, I think that also aligns beautifully with kind of like the regulatory landscape. So that's kind of how we're viewing it, is like taking advantage of, the different, because collagen has a lot of different price points depending on the quality, the application, and such. So that's why we're kind of starting up here. And then as we scale, we can hopefully touch on all the applications.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So obviously cosmetics and those types of skincare applications are going to be more expensive on like you're going to get a higher price product. Yeah. So that's the one you could target. And it sounds like from what you're saying, it's less of a regulatory overhang because it's not being consumed by the consumer.
Well, yeah, exactly. So actually skincare and skincare and cosmetics actually pretty loosely regulated.
Right.
Which is, I kind of surprised me, but basically you just have to do like usually a safe and suitable analysis in which you would show that, our collagen is bioidentical or behaves the same way chemically, identical to the naturally occurring, which it is, because really we're doing the same thing, right? But just in a lab, which is actually more sterile than if you had to take it from a real animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, looking at your website, you guys have a number of different types of cells in the lab, right? So you have animal, you have human. What are the different types of collagens that you're working on in the lab?
So right now we're working on bovine, porcine, human, and marine. And so human is mainly for biomedical and pharmaceutical applications. Right. It's
not for consumption.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, see, so I don't think so, but it's also quite limited out there, and it's very, very expensive. And then bovine is kind of like the very big one, which kind of ties into all sectors really. And then same with porcine, very much in like food and bev. And then marine is kind of like a little bit more kind of like newer and very like fast growing, which can actually also be applied to all of the above. So yeah, and we're focusing right now mainly on bovine and human actually.
All right. What I've read is that you guys are targeting, at least you were early in the year, a mid 2022 commercial production launch. That was, I think, something you talked about in an article early this year. How are we looking at that? Is that still what you're targeting?
So, I mean, we are right now, what's next for us for this year is focusing on scale. So actually in this fall, we'll develop basically like a path to scale, strategy. And so I think at the end of the year, we'll much better know exactly what that timeline is going to look like, because it's still biology. And sometimes, things work great in the small scale, and then you go to bigger scale, and then suddenly something's not working. So to be on the safe side of things, I mean, yes, I want to aim to that. But again, it also depends on regulatory, and it depends on what scale we can take and how fast.
And I don't mean to pin you down to timeline. That wasn't meant for that. Just kind of getting an idea. But you brought up, one of my favorite things to talk about is that path, the ever difficult hill to climb, the path to scale. So what are you thinking there? I mean, are you looking at, moving from kind of the bench top towards like kind of like, prototyping, and then ultimately to kind of like getting that bigger production? How does that look for you? Are you kind of, can you describe what your kind of plan is early on?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have established multiple proof of concepts. We can show that we can make functional collagen in the lab using our cells, which is awesome. And so now we're moving into bioreactor scale. So we're moving away from flask into bioreactor, which is kind of like a little pilot scale. Depending on how that performs, we're going to move into a little bit bigger pilot scale. And then after that, we're going to start in the new year, actually, you know, when we know exactly what a bioreactor will look like, exactly what kind of, you know, characteristics we need from it, because there's a few out there, and we may also need to modify it, and obviously like the process as well. So there's a few tasks ahead of us and challenges. But then after that, so by the end of the year, we'll know exactly kind of like, all right, what do we need? Do we want to, and then now there's also a term which is basically outscale. So rather than only scale up and have big units, you may actually have multiple big units, right? So not necessarily go bigger, but go, you know, more units. So that's probably what it will look like for us as well. And that will begin, like that next real kind of scale step will then be at the beginning of the year once we've tested through, you know, this fall.
Okay. And because you're doing different types of collagen, does the processes you're building work across those? Are you going to be able to take essentially kind of the infrastructure you're going to build to scale and apply that to all those fairly interchangeably?
Yeah, I think the only difference is that, I mean, collagen is pretty well reserved across species. The only thing is that, for example, if you look at a marine collagen, they usually have a lower denaturing temperature and things like that because, you know, the animal lives in colder temperatures than like a cow or a pig would. And then also, for example, like stability under different pHs. But really, it's going to be a very much similar process. We may need to tweak a few things. But other than that, it's the same process, really. You know, we're building a technology platform, right? And I think, collagen is first. There may be other things as well in the future that we want to work on.
Exciting. Any hints of what that next thing could be? Or
Well, we can, I mean, for right now, our main thing is really just show that we can make collagen not only as is, but better, you know, high quality in a much more sustainable and efficient way. And then after that, like I said, you know, we're building a platform. So there's definitely opportunity to kind of, you know, go spread and go to like different, very interesting proteins that are also currently only found in animals.
All right. Okay. So you talked about moving to the bioreactor.
Yep.
Talk about that. Are you finding service providers out there that have kind of equipment that is ready to do? Are you looking at maybe building your own bioreactor or kind of moderating one that's out there? Talk about what's going on.
All of the above right now, because so we're using adherent cell culture, which is a bit like right now. I think that the main is like suspension cell culture. That's like the main one that they have bioreactors available for, and adherent is a little bit different. So basically, you know, the cells are attached to some kind of surface, and we need that. So we're actually looking at all those options, staying very open-minded. You know, we're building out a team now in-house that are going to work on that. And so we have some commercial bioreactors that we're going to be testing. And then, you know, we may tweak something. We may end up building something ourselves, really depending on how they perform and what we're finding during this fall. So that's really, you know, again, like this fall is meant for us to really establish that path to scale and understand exactly what we'll need so we can move into the new year and be like, all right, this is what we need. This is how much money we need. This is what it's going to look like, and then get that, and then move into that larger scale. So all of the above.
And I think you raised, was it around 2 million? I think am I recalling that? Was that this year?
Yeah, that was earlier this spring. So that was in March that we wrapped that up.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you guys have only been around a year, so it couldn't have been too much longer for that. So, you know, each kind of milestone, right, as you move to the next level of production and scale up, oftentimes means you're going around and talking to funders and venture capitalists. And I imagine that's part of the process right now.
So right now we're not actively fundraising. So I think, again, I want to hit those milestones. Like I want to be able to go and say, this is what we need. This is what that path is going to look like. And, you know, do you want to be a part of the journey? Or, you know, I mean, we'll see there. So, I mean, we still obviously, like I always take the call if someone reaches out and want to, you know, chat or something. I always do that. You never know, right?
Always take the call. You always
take the call. And like you always, like worst case scenario, you have an interesting conversation with someone, right? And you get to know them. But not actively fundraising right now, but we'll probably start to do that later this year, early next year, when we kind of have established that path a little bit better and have hit the milestones that we're looking to hit.
All right. So collagen is a huge market. Mm-hmm. I think on your website, I've seen on others these pie charts of, you know, how big it is and what the pie is allocated to. Food and bev is the biggest, I think, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Cosmetics is big.
Yeah.
Realistically, if you were to kind of put on your prognosticator hat, how much will we eat into those different components of the collagen market with these alternative next-gen collagens in the next 5 years, the next 10 years?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, I think So I guess one thing that's working, I guess, in our favor, which is not good for the planet, but the fact that we're kind of at capacity when it comes to animal agriculture, right? Like we can't cut down more rainforest to grow crops to feed the animals, right? So, and at the same time, the demand for collagen and such, even like supplements, like it's growing so crazy. Like people want that. And, they're finding studies that it's really good for you to consume these things. And also there's just no animal free versions out there. I mean, okay, there are some now more. So I think that's tough. And then, I mean, it's tough to say. I think again, really the question is scale. It's hard to compete with something, animal agriculture, it's at scale. It's very, very efficient. It's large quantities. And, if we didn't use bones and hooves and things like that and skin for gelatin, then maybe it would just be waste, right? Or maybe it would go into animal feed or something like that. So that is hard to compete with. Do we want to get to that point? Certainly. And again, like I think what's working in our favor is the fact that that's limited. Like you can't scale that, more. And our process is going to be more efficient. Also happening under one roof. We don't need to, grow animals for 3 to 5 years, ship them to a slaughterhouse, slaughter them, get the meat, then take whatever we don't eat to collagen and gelatin plant, process that through a very extensive process, right? Like our starting point is actually right here. We don't even need to separate blood and fat and stuff like that. So I think that's what's good for us, but certainly it's hard to say exactly what percentage. Yeah. It's a question of scale. It's the short answer.
You'll leave the predictions to the prognosticators, but there's no shortage, I think, of demand.
No.
Yeah. I would imagine that like that demand is maybe already, I would imagine some big companies have already started to reach out to you and at least be curious and ask questions.
Yeah. Certainly,
companies who would consume collagen in their products.
Yeah, and I think so. One thing that we didn't really realize that some of these collagen and gelatin plants are struggling with is the fact that it's hard to source raw material. So, diseases happen, things like that. And you also have inconsistencies in the quality. Like if you're talking about a gelatin or collagen, you have something called bloom strength, which is basically how good of a gelling agent it is. And if you think about a gummy bear, like there's maybe like 2 to 6% gelatin in it. That's a huge variance. That's like in the grand scheme of things, that's a big difference. And that's because you have these different bloom strengths and the different quality of the collagen and the gelatin. And so that's something that we didn't even think about, that these companies are struggling with sourcing raw material. And that's where our technology, it's scalable. It's on demand. We can basically say, we want to make this much, we want to make that much. And because we're controlling the process, we're hoping to have a much more consistent quality as well, where we know exactly what the outcome will be and what the quality will be. But yeah, we have had companies reach out to us and shown a lot of interest in this because it's going to be the first time that you'll actually see kind of like a fully functional collagen that's cell based and not derived from animals.
Well, great. Well, it sounds like you are on a good path. I'm excited to see where you go and how this grows. Yeah. And Stephanie Michelsen, thank you so much for telling me about Gelotech and spending time with me.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
It's been great. All right, that's it for this episode of the Spoon Podcast. Thank you so much to Stephanie Michelsen for spending time with me today. I appreciate it. And if you want to learn more about Gelotech, just go to their website, gelotech.com. That's spelled with a J, not a G. And if you want to listen to more podcasts, more Spoon podcasts, just go to the Spoon website, Google us, or just go to spoon.tech. You can find us there and find more podcasts, or go to your favorite podcast app, the usual places like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, where you're listening to this right now. Probably. So, okay, that's it for now. See you later, everyone.